Hello and welcome to EBAday 2022 here in Vienna. I'm Debbie Bell-Hosking. I'm joined by Daragh Kirby of Intercope and we're chatting about BAS in the cloud, but before we get there, also ISO 20022 readiness. Hello Daragh.
Hi Debbie.
Really good to have you here.
Delighted to be here, to see people in person, to see the smiles on their faces rather than their screens.
Absolutely, I second that.
Yeah.
ISO 20022 readiness.
Yeah.
In reality, how ready do you think banks are for November T2 go live and related schemes?
Sure, yeah. Well, from Intercope point of view, we work with an awful lot of banks, so we have an idea of where their readiness is. But I guess rather than react based on a few, we should look at the statistics that are out there. And one of the things with the T2 and all of these readiness is that how closely related the schemes are. So we also need to look at CBPR Plus, which also goes live in November. And SWIFT have published some sort of high-level statistics on this, but I think we can gather where we are from this. So 45% of all payments after November 2022, according to SWIFT, will be ISO. As part of that, 95% of those intermediary flows will be relayed in ISO 20022. Around a quarter of that 45% will contain rich party information, so ultimate debtor, ultimate creditor, things that can be really used within the data. And about 20% will also have rich information contained within it, so something that we can use from day one or as part of the actual reason for ISO 20022. I think it's about a quarter will have structured postal address, really good for sanctions filtering, that type of thing, and 5% will contain remittance information. Now, we also have to look at the other schemes, though, when we see in relation to the readiness. So the May guidance from the Bank of England in relation to the interim period between November go live for CBPR Plus and when CHAPS in April of 2023 goes to full ISO, is that they've said that any payment coming through the cross-border scheme that has a CHAPS leg contained within it cannot have any rich information within the ISO 20022. And the Bank of England have also set out to say that there's going to have to be an awful lot of resource for problem management and exception management. So moving to T2, as per your question, we can see that some statistics, more prescriptive statistics, that 15 of the 25 central banks were saying green at the end of last year, and around 60% of the other participants were saying, we think we're ready to go, and maybe the other 40% were in around the yellow. So if we look at all of that, that's a lot. Rather than me giving you a knee-jerk reaction, I think if we look at all of those, I think what we can infer is that not all banks, even within the Eurozone, will be ready to do ISO on November. And also that the ISO fully fledged, we get to the rich data, that's going to be longer and more phased than we had first thought. And I think, banks can receive ISO, but not all banks will be able to send ISO. And in the end, we're really lucky that we have the MT scheme and we have this coexistence period up till 2025, because that's going to be where the majority of payments are still made after November. Now that has another angle because it puts an awful lot of pressure on the payments operations, which probably leads more into the banking, the BAS that you wanted to discuss as well. But that's something that we're really seeing is that, the banks that we work with, they're really under pressure doing great jobs and everything, but there's a real sort of what happens after November, and are we ready as a bank to manage both types of payments, and when will it move completely from one side to the other?
And when we spoke moments earlier, you used the term cautious but optimistic.
Yes, correct. Yes, I think that's the report. It's cautious but optimistic. Yeah. So things are improving, but at the same time, there will be a point where there will be some banks that won't be able to make ISO payments in Europe come November.
And you also touched on BAS. So
yes.
Where are we with BAS in the cloud?
Well, BAS is like, it's becoming a bit of a catch-all phrase like fintech was previously. I guess the idea of BAS, the definition, if we look at it, is that a licensed bank will integrate their digital products into another company's products. So airline is the classic example that we use, where airlines could potentially offer frequent flyer customers, loans or things, credit to be able to make flight payments, etc., and hence, have a greater touch point with their customer. But I think in general where we are with BAS is that we had open banking, we've had APIs, we've had all of this structure, and I think people are looking around and saying, okay, how can we make this ecosystem of banking products, how can we make these better for everybody to be able to use? And embedded finance is the one that's used all the time. But if we roll back to payments as a service has been around for quite a while. We've had indirect participants, we've had service bureaus, but I think what's new is being able to offer those in the cloud and being able to offer API connectivity to it. So whether you're embedding it into the products of one of your large customers or corporates, or whether it's actually a service that you can white label that fintechs or others could use. I think that, so we're at a real, it's a very popular catch-all phrase for things, but the market is growing hugely, as we can see from the, the value that's contained there.
And I'm going to pick up on that and some of those keywords you used towards the end of your response there.
Okay.
The cloud, it has a role.
Yes.
How are fintechs, banks, and technology providers reacting?
Well, as a technology provider, Intercope ourselves, so we provide the software on the interbank network. So we are about to go live with Revolut, for example, one of the largest fintechs, to do SEPA payments in the cloud. So really, really good coup for us. And literally Revolut are handing their transactions over into the cloud and processing them through. So the fintech has to behave like a bank. They still have to clear out payments, but they're deciding to do it in the cloud. And I think what that shows to us and to the marketplace is that the cloud is now seen as a much more secure proposition than it had been previously for transaction banking. And I think we're seeing the cloud vendors themselves are really getting, they had sort of generic clouds, but now they have financial services or even payment specific clouds, which means that they're realizing that the security that's contained within it and what has to be done needs to be more industry specific and more realizing to this marketplace.
So the journey is becoming more fine-tuned.
Indeed, absolutely. And the whole onset, as I said, with open banking before and APIs has made the banks ready for this as well. So the ability that they could offer these services up into the cloud. The only thing that and I'm on a panel actually tomorrow is to discuss is they're talking about, are banks slow to the market? I don't believe they are actually. I think banks are really, really ready to take advantage of this. I think the fintechs will have their value too, but I think banks are in a really, really good place to be able to have their products as a service running in the cloud.
Daragh, thank you. That's been really interesting.
Thank you, Debbie.